Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And this week, we will be doing an introduction to Outpost Zero, which will be the following 3 weeks of podcasts, one for each trade. And we'll also take a look at the creative team behind this book. Now, this is a different style choice for us. This is the first, I guess it's like teen marketed, but so here's the thing. I wouldn't have called it teen marketed until I picked a complete collection. So let's just talk about that.
Sure. No, I mean, it is, that was interesting because I didn't know there was a complete collection out until you had mentioned it. And then when you showed it to me and I looked it up and realized that it was a digest format, that was really curious. But I mean, it was curious in my mind for like 10 seconds. And then I kind of came to and realized, no, that makes a whole lot of sense. So for anyone listening, the digest format size is,
I mean, it's like a normal paperback,
it's close.
For a novel, not like a graphic.
It's closer to that size. It is, to put it in maybe a little more modernish terms, it is much closer to a manga size. They're usually maybe 5x8, something like that. I think the Outpost Zero collection is like 6x9, and a regular comic is what, like 6 5/8 by 10 1/4 or something like that. God, I don't know why I know those numbers off the top of my head.
I was just gonna say I would have been so crude compared to that because I was a regular one is like, I don't know, an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper.
It's
size.
smaller than that. But the fact that it comes out in the complete collection, and that was recently too. I think that was, as you're recording this, I think that came out in a month or so ago. So like, April 2023 or something, I think. And the series itself ran from July 2018 to December 2019. So it's relatively recent, which means the third trade probably would have come out early 2020. Just I don't have the dates exactly in front of me, but just knowing what the lag time is after a series is over, usually around that time. So for maybe about 3 years after the series wraps, like the last thing is published, being that final trade, for it to come out in a complete collection, I guess that's not unusual. But the fact that it did come out just as a digest format collection, which means it is that they're hoping to specifically target, that middle grade or YA kind of readership. When something is shaped that size, it's meant to signal to, I think, retailers that, like, put this book with the other books that readers of that age would potentially like,
well, that, and I think it's also a pretty accessible price point. I mean,
well, and that too, yes.
When you're looking at $3.99 per single issue for 14 issues. And then the complete collection comes out for $17.99.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what I think a normal trade costs, not a complete collection.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the appeal, and that's part of the business behind those digest trades. It's something that Marvel does quite a bit in terms of reprinting material. Whether it's some of their teen characters or younger teen groups or whatnot.
I have a Miss Marvel at Comic-Con, that's this size. They've been doing a lot of that with like the Marvel Verse books are coming out in this size. And then a lot of the Marvel Masterworks are being republished into this size.
I don't know about that interesting if they're the Masterworks.
A whole stack of them. Yeah.
Really? The Masterworks?
Are they Mighty Works?
Might be, yeah. Well,
the Marvel marketing is out of control.
Well, the Masterworks are reprints of like classic, like Silver and Bronze Age stories. So I don't those would be reprinted in a digest form. But often it's newer, younger characters. Obviously, Kamala Khan, Miles Morales, Spider-Gwen, Runaways, which is interesting. So we'll get to that a little bit later when we start talking about the creative team. But Runaways being a teen-focused superhero group, being reprinted in digest format. So it is something that's done with that Marvel does with their reprints. Other side of the street, DC does a little more. Like, I don't even know if they do reprints of stuff. But for this kind of level of reader, they have an entire line of like original graphic, which are really, really, really good. And this is one area where DC just dominates Marvel. The fact that they put out new original content specifically for this format, specifically for these readers. Marvel has a couple here and there. Like I think they've got a handful of maybe Miles stories. And that's only come out in the past couple of years, piggybacking off of something like Into the Spider-Verse, which was 2018 at this point. But DC has a whole bunch of stuff focused on, and not just focused on their teen characters like the Teen Titans or whatnot, but like focused on like teen characters of all of their superheroes, and it's a segment of the market that they dominate. So I don't know if I can recall a whole lot of creator-owned books, something like Outpost Zero, that comes out that was released in a standard format, not specifically quote unquote marketed for kids or teens or that YA audience,
and then
to then when the complete collection comes out, specifically target that.
Well, and I think they did something that fundamentally changes the way that it's read as well, which is dissolving the issue distinctions.
Yes.
You can't tell when you're transitioning from issues 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and 3 to 4.
Yeah.
However, when you move from trade to trade, it is chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. So the whole complete edition is 3 chapters, which is how our podcast is going to break it down.
Yeah, because
when you asked me how far I got, I was like, I don't know actually. Like I can give you a page number, but I can't tell you which issue I'm in.
But yeah, no, and I haven't read enough of those digest formats to know if that's the case. If they break them down per trade or per issue, because the 3 chapters doesn't sound that's not bad. How long is that? Well, each chapter is a trade collection, and there are 3 trades here. We're talking about 14 issues total for Outpost Zero. Trade 1, I think because there's an oversized first issue. Trade 1 is issues 1 through 4. Trade 2 is issues 5 through 9, and volume 3, trade 3 is 10 through 14. So they're all roughly, 4-ish, about 5-ish issues total. Again, with that kind of oversized first issue. But yeah, you can't tell when you pick up that complete collection. And I think maybe that also speaks to maybe what the expectation is for a reader that age. They're not looking at chapter breaks every 22 pages, Well,
I mean, I think sometimes, I mean, that it kind of makes me question, if this is how you saw the story, why didn't you start publishing like OGN size things, making an OGN trilogy, which is kind of what's conveyed here to me. That says like, no, you don't need to break every 22 pages. Sit down and read this chapter, read this trade in one sitting. So to me, it feels like a collection of OGNs, even though I know, because I have at least the first 4 in single issue, that, this was a monthly single issue comic. So I wonder if they just reconsidered it after it was all out and said, you know what, this flows pretty well, and there's no need for all of these breaks. That was just a convention of publishing. And I suspect it's easier to get a monthly single issue book going rather than pitching to Image like, okay, well, we don't have an audience or market yet, and not, a huge name recognition for the creative team, but here's an OGN.
Well, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, there aren't many people that can do that. And as far as at Image, at least, and as far as I can tell, that list has 3 people on it. It's
all the Image exclusive people.
Yeah, it's Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. They can do whatever they want. And it's Jeff Lemire. He can do whatever he wants. No, I don't know if anyone else can go to them and say, I mean, maybe Kirkman can or something like that. But I mean, that's why I find it interesting, because it was conceived, created and drawn with the idea of being 14 separate issues, with that natural break there. So then I have to imagine the pivot, like I said, about 3 years or so after that 3rd trade collection comes out, so there's no new material. Anyone who was trade waiting or whatever has all the issues now in hand. You can get them in either format, single issue or trade. So for 3 years later to come back and even get the opportunity to get it reprinted, I have to think there was something, maybe they got some sort of tracking, some sort of understanding, because I mean, this wasn't a huge hit. Outpost Zero was not a big hit. And there was I seem to recall some discourse at the time about this book being like among some of the most pirated books.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, does that to you convey a teen audience?
Well, see, that's I don't know. I'd have to go back and see what that was. I remember this being part of the discourse, basically in terms of like people were reading this book. That the creative team got the sense that people were reading this book, but people were not buying this book. Like they knew there were people out there reading it, but they weren't buying it. So how do you continue it? Because how do you justify? How does like Image or Skybound
what's in
justify
it for the publisher? Right.
Yeah. And how are you helping the creators now? If the book's not getting sold, they're not getting paid. But yet people are reading the book. So yeah, I as we're talking, that something sparked in the back of my mind. I'll have to maybe go back in and look at that a little bit and see what that was. It's been a few years now, but I seem to recall that being a topic of conversation. I think because one of the guys in the creative team, it might have been the colorist or someone had kind of jumped into that fray and talked about it. So, but regardless, it was not a big kind of financial success. So, I mean, even the idea that it got to 14 issues seems seems on some level kind of miraculous. The fact that it even got that far. Because
oh, sure.
I think it's struggling to find an audience. And so I think maybe that's why coming back to it now.
Struggle to find, for lack of a better term, investors. It sounds like it had an audience, but no one was paying them for it. They were looking for customers.
Yeah.
But as I'm thinking about this book now, and as I read it, I was thinking like, I wonder what other series, because like a lot of these, as I'm sure a lot of these like publishers get me like coming and going. Like they'll get me buying the single issue, buying the digital trade when it's out, then buying like individual trades, and sometimes even buying like the complete collection, the deluxe
compendium
hardcover,
or something like that.
Compendium, omnibus. And it's like, how many times did I need to own this content? So I'm almost the opposite of the Outpost Zero reader in usual. But I wonder what other of like my favorite stories could have been done like this, where they eliminate the issue to issue distinction. And I'm like, not that many. Because when I think of like a series like Descender, which is, one of my favorites, each issue will kind of rotate the point of view and which characters it's following, which means like there's like intrinsic natural issue to issue breaks, and you may not see, the characters you were reading last time for another month or two. Whereas this one is seamless. Like this does not bounce around.
Yeah. It is written in a way that is a little more, I guess, linear in the storytelling.
Yeah, and it's conducive to this. Yeah, no, it's linear and it's character centric, and it has an ensemble, but it's not like, okay, here's one from her perspective, and here's one from his perspective, and here's one from this person's perspective. It's kind of following the same vantage point the entire time.
Well, I tell you what before we get, I have a comment on that, but why don't we get into, because you've gotten this far and haven't actually talked about what the book is about.
Oh, sure.
Why don't you get into that real quick, and then I will jump back in with kind of what sparked in my mind when you said that. So why don't we run down a quick synopsis of what the official synopsis was? And
so here's the official synopses. I think that's the plural. Skybound says this: in Outpost Zero, excuse me, in Outpost Zero, the people work the land, go to the fights every Friday night, and tuck their children into bed. But the outpost is no place for dreams or aspirations. To survive is ambitious enough. As Aaliyah, that's how I'm pronouncing her name, by the way.
Same.
As Aaliyah and her friends graduate to adulthood on a frozen world never meant to support human life, something stirs, something sees. So I think that's Skybound, which is kind of an interesting premise. It sounds like it was a 2010s dystopian thing in the vein of like, the Hunger Games or Divergent or something like that, where, and Skybound is your imprint where the complete compendium is. So here's the Image, which was like pitching to the normal single issue reader. Welcome to Outpost Zero, the smallest town in the universe. The people there work the land, go to the fights every Friday night, and tuck the children to bed. But Outpost Zero is no place for dreams or aspirations. To survive is ambitious enough. As Ellie and her friends graduate to adulthood on a frozen world never meant to support human life, something stirs, something sees. Explore the mysteries and wonders of The Frost in this oversized debut issue by Eisner-winning writer Sean Kelley McKeever.
Real similar. Quick, though, what I will say, this book always came out on Spy. It was always on the Skybound imprint, even on a single issue.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's been out there.
I don't
the whole
think
time.
I recognize that.
Yeah, it's
But I don't shop by Skybound. You know, I shop by, like in the same way that I picked up Hairball recently, and would have called that a Dark Horse book.
It is,
but it's Flux House, which is Matt Kint's new.
I mean, at this point, so real quick jumping in, Skybound is an imprint at Image that is it's Robert Kirkman's imprint. It's kind of his curated imprint, I guess. Robert Kirkman, people know from The Walking Dead, Invincible, whatnot. He is chief executive officer now, chief creative officer. He's basically risen up to be like the head of Marvel now. I believe when he took, head of Image, and I believe when he took over, it was he was the first like non-Image founder to be at that position. Like, so when you think Skybound, you think Image. I mean, that is what it is. There are Skybound has this kind of what they call the wheel of awesome, basically, where they want to support creators in their comics, but also find avenues for merchandising and licensing stuff for television, film adaptations, for game adaptations, for like new like VR experience, whatever it is. They want to do everything with their comics to try and help creators cash in and monetize on those things. Which is why you see things like The Walking Dead, and Invincible, not just as adaptations, but like you see, all the toys and the pins and the gear and the shirts and things like that. So I think it feels to me like it's the kind of place that a creator would go, not just to Image where they own the rights, but they own the rights, and also there's an infrastructure there if they want to spin it off and do more things and try to monetize their idea in some kind of greater way. So, but really, Image, Skybound, they are effectively interchangeable. It's just a side imprint of the same overall Image model.
Yeah, which it's interesting if you go to the Skybound website and look at the list of compendiums there. Yeah, they're all Kirkman. It's all Kirkman's books in the shop.
But
it's like he's still the driving force.
It's his line, but if you see there are a number of creators that when they do their Image books, they're almost always on Skybound. I'm thinking like Daniel Warren Johnson, who wrote and drew like Extremity, Murder Falcon, both really great books. The writer Joshua Williamson, a lot of his books are on Skybound. Like he has 2 books with the artist Andre Bresson, both Birthright and his current one Dark Ride. There are, those were all on Skybound. So yeah, I think there's a group of kind of people who work with Image who, when they do their books, they're probably always going to be on the Skybound imprint. But in the end, it will always be still filed under Marvel. Under Image. So
that's your second Freudian.
Second time I've done that. Yeah, I don't know why. That's weird.
They're quite different.
Yeah, they are quite different
in terms of how they treat their creators.
But it going back to the synopsis there, it is a teen focused book. And it is kind of a, you mentioned that kind of, that Hunger Games Divergent, that kind of YA.
Well, in the
that
sense
existed there.
That I think the central question of the series, at least early on, but I think a theme for the entire series is this like pitting survival against I was trying to think of a way to make it parallel, surviving versus thriving. Sure. These characters are dealt a bad hand, like they're meant to colonize, but they land on a planet where really colonization is kind of a pipe dream.
Mm-hmm.
And they're told by the older generations, like, basically keep your head down. You do this, you don't do exciting work. You're just here to survive. We just perpetuate ourselves and the species. But you have this young, ambitious hope, in discovery and exploration, that we could actually do more than survive. We could thrive. And that to me feels, one, really interesting, but two, that's the dystopian dynamic. Someone who's rejecting the world they have been inherited into. Because like most of these dystopian novels do not start with the building of the dystopia. You start with fresh eyes from someone, coming of age into this dystopia.
Well, and
starting to question things.
That's the key right there. It's a coming of age story. It is, in a lot of ways, it's a spin on the kids on bikes trope.
Right.
I mean, whether you're talking about E.T., The Goonies, Stranger Things, Paper Girls, a book that you and I love. It is that same kind of mindset. It just happens that, this is kids on bikes, but like on Hoth or something, that's basically where you are. But it is that same idea. And that's the driving point of, of the narrative, is that coming of age story is how do you grow up and try to find your place in the world or in society when your society is this, or you question where you are because there's something else going on, and part of that is the idea that, you always think as you grow up that your parents or the adults, that they're not telling you everything. You as a kid, you question everything. Why do we do this? Why are we doing that? And you never get answers from adults because adults don't want to, because you feel they don't trust you. Like you feel like I'm growing, I'm whatever, 14, 15, 16. I know what's going on. Why don't you trust me with, why are you lying to me?
Right. Well,
you're
so
very
sure,
common teenage feeling.
Yeah. And you're sure that you have a vantage point that they have not considered.
Yes. Yeah. Without thinking that maybe, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, whatever it is, but there's no consideration that the adults you're thinking of, at no point wherever your age, you thought the same thing, and now they're the adults who are older doing the same things that the adults who were older when they were young did to them. But yeah, it's a coming of age story, and it is focused on this group of kids, which is why it makes sense now that they've reprinted this entire run as a digest format to try and capture that and specifically focus that market. But again, it is a little curious to me, and maybe that's why it didn't find the audience that maybe it could have had in single issue, because there is a thought, and maybe it's true that those readers don't read single issues. The idea that single issues
it's expensive.
Yeah, well,
it's like most comics are for adults. I think we're well past that point.
100%.
And that's happened a long time ago. And I mean, when I first got into comics, I was an adult, and another adult friend of mine, I mean, we were 29 or something, and another 29-year-old friend was like, "Oh, you can't get into that. This is way too expensive." And I was like, "There's only $2.99 an issue." Until DC, pulled the rug out from under me.
Yeah, well, but we are going to hit $4.99 as a regular very, very soon. But yeah, no, it is expensive, and I think that younger audience also just isn't in the habit of reading things in monthly installments. They want something
binging.
And whether that's the manga influence or whatnot. So yeah, when this came out a handful of years ago, I do think there was some not mixed messaging, but I think there was some kind of mudding of the waters in terms of like, what exactly is this? Who is this for? Where are we going with? So, I was, so once I got over my initial confusion of why it would come out in a digest format, and then when it hit me that, no, wait, that actually makes the most sense. I was then hopeful that maybe this book finds an audience that it maybe would not and could not have found otherwise. Like if they had reprinted here's I already invoked his name, but let's go with Paper Girls. Paper Girls is a very similar idea, right? We got a group of kids. It's kids on bikes going out and exploring the world, coming of age in the world, and discovering new things about it. Paper Girls is not a comic for kids. You could give it to some kids.
You give it to teenagers, yeah.
You could give it to some
I would not
teenagers.
give it to kids.
Yeah, you can give it to some who may be in that 14, 15, maybe in the high school range, depending on the kind of reader they are or whatnot. But that I don't think is a book that would be really beneficial in a digest format to give to kids who are like, I don't know, 8 to 12 or something like that, which I think
nothing Brian K. Vaughan's ever written would be appropriate for that age range.
Not true. We will get to that in a little bit. But but Outpost Zero is that kind of middle grade book that would benefit from being marketed and given to the kids of those age, even though these are similar type stories, because the approach is very different. There are a lot of, intentionally, like I do think, I guess I'll put it this way. I do think Paper Girls is meant to be read by adults remembering when they were kids. And I think Outpost Zero has the perspective of
learn and grow with me, right?
Yeah. You are supposed to be these kids and not look back on them. And I think that's part of why Paper Girls was set in the 80s when Brian K. Vaughan was that age. So for readers who are of similar age as BKV, that when they go back and they read those characters that on the page, and when they see them, they're connected with their own childhoods. Outpost Zero being set, different time, different place, literally all that stuff. I think you are meant to identify with them as they are growing. But so yeah, I hope they see these sales. I hope they're able to reap some of those benefits on the back end that maybe they didn't get a chance to when the book was coming out. Because I mean, gosh, it feels like it would be the kind of thing that you could sell to a Netflix or something like that as an animated show for that kind of, like I said, that middle grade YA teen audience, right?
I mean, yeah, I would think if this one really took off, and there wasn't the big buyback now on IP stuff, because every streaming service has realized they're making way too much content and they need to scale it back. This would have been very ripe for like a movie or show adaptation. But I, as I usually feel, I'm always open to adaptations of things. I feel like this is the best medium for this story.
Oh, without question.
In particular, because I
think
for a teen dystopian type thing, this artwork, which we'll get into the artist a little bit later, is stunningly beautiful, and the CGI on it would look absolutely terrible.
Well, it depends on what the style is. So I had to think about the name of the comic again, but a similar book that came out in a similar-ish realm. This is over on Boom Studios. Was called Mech Cadet U. It's a book by writer Greg Pak and artist Takeshi Miyazawa, and it's about a bunch of teens who basically go out and learn to pilot giant mechs. It's but again, it's a teen focused book, younger characters. It has been optioned and it is being turned into an animated show at Netflix. And Outpost Zero falls into the exact same realm as Mech Cadet U. The book was called Mech Cadet U. The show was called Mech Cadets. So it falls in that exact same realm. And so it feels like that there could be an audience for something like this to target that demo. I think something that streamer, that all publishers crave. You want to get that younger demo. You kind of want to get them hooked and into your property. So it feels like a book like this has a chance. It has the kind of story, and it can have the kind of characters and the kind of environment that I think could be appealing. So I hope they get a chance to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great, but also especially for a publisher like Image, I think they really want to move books at the end of the day, because it's creator owned, and Image's profit is in the books, not necessarily in the adaptation as much.
But again, this is where the Skybound part comes into it. Skybound is all about that. Skybound wants the
Invincible and Walking Dead, and
because it's creator owned. Like I think Image already gets their cut. They want the creators to get, especially Kirkman. Kirkman, I believe, cares more about the creators getting paid than like Skybound getting paid, because they got their money already. So if this is something that they would want to do, the creators of this book, I said I hope they get to. I hope it works out for them, because I said I think it's an interesting strategy to basically pivot after the fact and say, wait, maybe this wasn't marketed right the first time when it was coming out, but we got enough issues out that we can pivot into this different kind of genre, different direction. I guess it is same genre that didn't change, but it's a different direction for them to focus on these teen readers, these younger readers. So I hope they have it. Hope they find that audience and can continue to get paid on it.
Yeah, and Skybound also does like video games and stuff too, right?
Well,
they're much more expansive than just.
Yeah,
I mean, most of these imprints that we've talked about, like Burger Books. Yeah. And the Burger Books is a particularly strange one. We talked about that with Seeds, which was an original publication for Burger. And one that's on my radar is an old Vertigo book called Air that's being republished by Burger. Yeah. But they're not turning it into a board game or video game. There's no Switch console for Burger Books.
Those imprints are just curated lines. So Burger Books is just, this is the book that Karen Berger said, you know what, I like this creator, I like this book. You mentioned Flux House earlier. Flux House is just the stuff that Matt Kint does. It's his own line. And then, so if you see that, and maybe it's not even a book that he writes, but it's coming from, he is curating that line. So everything that comes out with the Flux House logo on it is something that's passed through his hands and his eyes. He's seen it and given it a stamp of approval, either because he wrote it and drew it, or it's probably one of his friends, had a book that he wants to publish, that kind of thing. Skybound, specifically at Image, is all about trying to maximize the profits and for the creators for their books in any avenue that is, whether that's just putting out the books as comics and trade paperback collections, or turning that into adaptations to film, movies, to games, to experiences, to just merchandising and all that stuff. It's all about trying to maximize that for the creators. So I don't know if Outpost Zero has that, because it didn't have the biggest run when it came out, but if it comes in and gets it now, a few years after it's finished up, said more power to them. I hope it works out for these creators, because I think overall they do really, really good work, and this book's a real testament to that.
Yeah, and I think that's the important point here, is that we're trying to sell people on reading this along with us. And I think regardless of what its original audience, what its found audience, and what else might ever happen to it from here, by itself, these 14 issues are well worth your time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's just because something is, or may have been, or is now being marketed solely to, or not solely, but kind of mainly towards a younger audience, or a quote unquote younger audience. It doesn't mean that it's not something that everyone can read.
And if you're self-conscious about reading, the new format, by all means, go spend more money on Skybound and buy the original 3 trades.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it might even be like dollar bin fodder now. Like, you might be able to go clean up.
Oh,
at
absolutely.
A used comic shop.
Yeah. I mean, but the only issues, the only hang up there might be print run. It isn't like there's hundreds of thousands of copies of these issues out there. But yeah, it's just, it wasn't a book that did all that well. But I mean, yeah, no, if you can go and find it, and the new format is great. I've seen you have it. I have all the issues in single issue format, but I've seen, I got my hands on that collection, and it looks great. It's got a brand new cover, a gorgeous brand new cover, new art, and it looks really, really great. So yeah, pick it up however you could find it and read along with us here. But yeah, it's a great story either way. So
yeah. So let's dive into this creative team a little bit, because
sure.
I guess the only other thing I wanted to say, but I think I'll probably get this comp in our coming issues, is that the underlying hope and optimism in the midst of the grittiness of this story gives off very West Wing vibes for me. And in particular, this idea of like discovery being the great new hope, that particular Sam Seaborn scene where his old professor is in his office, and they're like, yeah, how do we get people on board with this project? It has no practical implications, and there's kids going hungry and all these other things. And then like there's this spark of inspiration where it's like it's about discovery, and Sam makes that really great speech at the end about how no one's dumber because we went to the moon. It's like, you can't think of a practical application of it, but no one's dumber, no one's hungrier because we went to the moon. So anyway, that those lines were like ringing through my head as I was reading this, which, as you know, like, what are the chances a West Wing quote is ringing through Mike's head? It's like, it's pretty good.
Pretty good. Yeah.
I can find I can connective tissue in basically anything I enjoy. I'll find. But anyway.
So we want to get into this team here. So we'll start with, the writer of this book, Kelley McKeever. He, so we've obviously harped upon how this book is not just focused, kind of aimed right now at teenage readers, younger readers, but mainly because it stars characters that are teenagers. And that is a major through line through, I think, much of what McKeever has done. And I think it makes sense why this would be his kind of, a big creator-owned book for him. Why do you want to go this route? Most of his work is at Marvel. He's got a little bit of DC work, like he did a run on Birds of Prey as writer following Gail Simone. Probably has the most issues written on Teen Titans, which again, like teen literally in the name there. But again, like I said, most of his stuff was done at Marvel. He's probably best known for, and this is how I know his name, even though I haven't really read a lot of these. I've read a little bit of them. These Mary Jane focused books. It started with the Mary Jane series, and then Mary Jane Homecoming, and then kind of the longer series was called Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane. It's kind of a retelling, a non-canonical retelling of Spider-Man stories or whatnot, or just a Spider-Man ethos focused solely on from the Mary Jane perspective. And the idea here was that it's kind of a very, I don't know, it was a very explicit attempt to try to grab younger female readers. Sure. The artwork was done, an artist I just mentioned, Takeshi Miyazawa, who has a very manga influenced style. He's Japanese, so whatever. That's what he grew up with. It has a very manga style. Those are books that are reprinted, very much so. Like if you find them now in bookstores, you will find them reprinted in the digest format, to the point where you actually might find them in the manga section. These like Spider-Man Loved Mary Jane books, you might not find them in the graphic novel section if you go to like Barnes and Noble or something like that. If you can find a Barnes and Noble where you live. It actually might be shelved with the manga section. I'm not quite certain, but that's where that's probably where he's best known to audience. So again, specifically younger characters, younger audience. Cause again, he's writing those from Peter and Mary Jane or whatnot being in their teenage years.
There's an aspect to the Spider-Man character historically that's all about that teen angst, right? Yes, so absolutely. I mean, I think that's a totally fair and often lost, in how grown-up comics have gotten, and how everyone has a gritty take on every character now. Not exclusively, but I don't think there's any character that hasn't been subjected to be like, let's make him more adult, give him some existential crisis. Oh no, and millennial writers will write kind of a millennial Spider-Man, and Xers will write an Xer Spider-Man, and I think the character was adaptable enough. But at its core, this was a teenage, high schooler. Yeah, initially, so it's it's a totally fair read of Spider-Man.
They're off, fair reads, 100%. Sure. But yeah, so also at Marvel, he wrote a book called Sentinel, which is part of it was part of an imprint in the early aughts called Tsunami, which was a explicit attempt to make manga style teenage focused books. I really want to crap on this imprint because it's kind of gross and not great. But Runaways came out of this imprint. Runaways, created by Brian K. Vaughan and Adrian Alfona, which is one of my favorite books, favorite Marvel books, maybe of all time. Some of my favorite characters. It started as part of this imprint. Again, teenage heroes, teenage characters that also exist within, Marvel 616 continuity. So these aren't separate these aren't what if stories. These are characters that exist in the world and interact with them. It's just they have this, a different bent, a different art style bent and whatnot. And what I was mentioning before, a lot of those books, when they got reprinted as collections, they were printed in regular, quote unquote, regular trade paperback size, but also in that digest format, including Runaways. You can get those first volumes, or maybe even all those volumes of Runaways, in that digest format size, because it works for that. Now, obviously, it's Marvel and not BKV's creator-owned stuff, which is obviously much more adult. But you can. That was the whole point there, and it was kind of gross, kind of cynical that they went so explicitly for that, to the point of calling the imprint Tsunami. But that was an attempt to go for that market, and that was 20 years ago. It was 2003. The conversation now is still about, well, manga versus Western comics, and who's winning, who's losing, what are kids reading, blah 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 blah. I mean, that was 20 years ago. Marvel was trying to capture that or tap into that market, and right. maybe they were too early, or I don't know what not. But again, Sentinel, teenage character. Teenage character who like befriends a Sentinel, which is one of the giant mutant killing mechs. So that's what that's about there. He created a character with artist Mike Norton called Gravity, which is I think explicitly supposed to be like a Spider-Man-esque, Spider-Man goes to college, like that era of superhero, that kind of superhero. So it's a new character that gets powers, and as he leaves high school, goes into college, that 18, 19-year-old range,
which much like the scrapped Marvel Spider-Man freshman year. Animated cartoon that was supposed to happen.
That kind of realm there. I think McKeever also, he wrote a volume of Inhumans, but not the Inhumans that people know, not the royal family like Medusa and Black Bolt or things like that. I believe he created a whole bunch of new humans, which again, they were a bunch of kids, like the next generation. It was almost like an Inhumans Academy kind of thing, So these kids going through and again, trying to find their place in the world of our world and also the world of the humans. So, he has other books that he's written, some creator-owned stuff, and other books at Marvel and a few more at DC. But again, the main through line for his work is teenage characters, and whether that's just what he's drawn to, whether that's all he really kind of feels or the best avenue for the stories he wants to tell, I don't know, but it's a very obvious pattern. So seeing a book like this come from him, it seems like it's natural for him, like he doesn't maybe have to think about getting in that mindset. Maybe that's just kind of where he lives in terms of his storytelling. Yeah. His storytelling mind. So when you lay Outpost Zero against all of his other work, it feels completely of a piece.
Yeah. I agree with that, even though I've not read much of him, but just looking over his resume, that, and I'm curious if at some point in our podcasting I will be able to unearth why there is a special thanks to Cliff Chiang in the back of this. Yeah. And I will say the front cover of the new collected edition does look like a scene from Paper Girls.
It really does. It really does.
It looks like Matt Wilson colors, and it looks like here's some teenage girls and a big robot. I mean, possibly time traveling robot.
I mean, it could have been Cliff Chiang was maybe he was a driving force to help getting this book reprinted as a complete collection. Who knows? I don't know.
That's true. Maybe he was just another guy who loves writing strong female teen characters. Yeah. And who knows?
But I mean, I think there's a similarish art style. I can see elements of what Cliff Chiang does, and with what the artist here does, Alexandre Tefenkgi. Tefenkgi is an interesting artist. So he's a French artist of Vietnamese Djiboutian descent. Okay. So think about where all those countries are on the globe.
Yep.
But he is someone with, he had worked in European comics, and his work in Western U.S. comics is incredibly short, but incredibly lauded. Outpost Zero was his first U.S. comic work, which is wild to think about. I don't even know, for him to jump in and get a book like this, and have it run, as many as it did, and not have any, I can't even imagine how that happened. But this was his first U.S. comic work. This was then followed up by a little book called The Good Asian, which he drew with writer Pornsak Pichashot, I believe it's pronounced. Well, I think I butchered that, but
I've never been brave enough to try to say it.
I think I got that hopefully close there. But anyway, all that book did was that, you know, his second book in the US market, they won the Eisner, the 2022 Eisner for best limited series or story arc. So comes out of the bat, he has 2 books out in the US and he's got an Eisner award. And The Good Asian is an incredible comic. Unbelievable comic.
Yeah, I think it's one we kick around doing on the podcast every once in a while. And now that it's like picked up for adaptation, it's like, we don't want to be adaptation chasers.
There's also the first arc there, that 12 issues is a complete story, but there is going to be a second season, I guess. It'll be The Good Asian, probably The Good Asian : something. Like I'll have a subtitle to it, but it'll come back. The book is too good and too popular for it not to. And so in the process, maybe he's working on that. You know, his next series is a series over at Boom, called Once Upon a Time at the End of the World, where he is one of 3 artists working with writer Jason Aaron. You know, that guy who's done some work in comics. So this book is really cool in that it tells a story of 2 characters, Maceo and Mezzi, throughout their life at 3 specific points in their life, and each of the artists draws a different section. So it starts off with them meeting as teenagers, again, that time of life, and that's the time that Tefenkgi draws. So when you see his art in Outpost Zero, you know that you can see how it is similar, but now it's a little better, a little more refined when you get to something like Once Upon a Time at the End of the World. But still drawing characters in that age range, you know. And then after that, in that book, the other artists there being Lila Del Duca and Nick Dragata, drawing those 2 characters as I think adults, maybe like 20 or 30 somethings, and then drawing them as significantly older, maybe like in their 50s and 60s or something like that. So it tells the story across all their lives, and each artist is drawing a different time frame. So, but for Tefenkgi to get that to work on the aspect of it when they're younger, a little more innocent, maybe a little more playful, because that's how the characters come off when you read that first arc of Once Upon a Time at the End of the World. It makes perfect sense. If you've seen his artwork coming off of, if you've read Outpost Zero, and then also now through this Once Upon a Time, you see the through line and the connection there. So I mean, those are the 3 series that he's done, that he's worked on, and that is literally it. You know, he did a short story for DC. I think it was last year, maybe for the DC Festival of Heroes, which was a big anthology book celebrating some of the Asian and Asian American heroes in DC. He did that short story. I believe it was a Ryan Choi, whatever, Adam story. He did that with Pornsak again, against, you know, because they were coming off of The Good Asian there. So he did a little short story there, and he just did a variant cover for a new DC book called City Boy, which is a book written by Greg Pak. It's about a new Korean American superhero that kind of operates out of Gotham. So those 5 titles.
I just say though, like,
those 5 titles are everything he's done in the U.S. market.
It's just unbelievable. But I think it's something that's still so inspiring about comics as a medium, that you start small, you do one thing, and you do it great. Mm-hmm. People do notice. Yeah, I mean, and it's not a guarantee, because I know plenty of great comic creators who I've been following for years, and I feel like, when are people going to notice how great this stuff is? You know, because they don't have any big commercial appeal or anything like that. But then for every one of those, you also have one of these where it's like, he came in, and if you told me like, hey, Mike, start working on comics, and by the time you're working on your 5th project, you'll be working with Jason Aaron, I would be like, absolutely not. There's no way I'd be working with a Jason Aaron.
It
or
is
even
one
on
of those,
Image.
Yeah. But it's a Boom book, but still create your own.
I mean this one.
Oh yeah.
Being on Image, to start, you know, like Image is kind of the big name in indie publishing. That's not where a lot of people start. A lot of indie creators aspire to, maybe in 10 years I'll get on Image.
Well, yeah, that was the motto, right? It was get work for hire, work for Marvel and DC, build up your portfolio, build up your resume, get your reps in, build an audience, but you don't give them any of your ideas because you don't own any of them. So go there,
right?
Get assigned to a book, write the hell out of it, do it great. Don't do a bad job. Yeah, do it great, but use their characters, get enough clout, and then take your idea to Image, and that's when you cash in. That was the model there. So, but I think maybe it's for some of these artists, especially some of the artists that aren't US based, I don't know how they find them online through social media or whatnot, maybe at conventions, and they see something and look, man, if you've got talent, someone will find you. They will find you, and you can get to work. And for someone like Tefenkgi, like I said, he has such a short resume already, but he's already considered for the rest of his career. He is now Eisner Award-winning artist, and that was his second book. And the book is incredible. It's awesome. Everyone should read it, and it's well deserved. But his second book out of the gate in the U.S. market, he's been awarded an Eisner, and he'll carry that with him. And any book he works on will always tout him as
it'll have that gold stamp or Eisner award-winning artist.
Eisner Award artist, yeah. So no, he's great, and the fact that this was his first work in the U.S. market, like I said, I think it's a little rougher on some of the character design. I think what you see in The Good Asian, and I think definitely what you see in Once Upon a Time at the End of the World, I think his character design is a little smoother. Now a few years later, it's a little cleaner. The lines are a little cleaner. But you can see the character design, the overall design, the aesthetic is still the same. It's still there. But he really does have, his art style really fits what I guess younger characters, just the way he draws characters, the way he conceives of them. It really does fit. It fits that kind of the younger aesthetic there. The way he does faces and expressions and all that, it fits that world. So, I don't think he wants to get typecast as only doing books about that. Obviously, The Good Asian isn't like that. But he does seem to have a knack for drawing these types of characters. So,
it's interesting
really
to figure out at what point do you have the ride or die following where people are season passing and they're just like, I no longer ask questions about the subject matter or the plot. If your name's on it, I buy it.
Oh, well, at this point for me, so I came to Outpost Zero.
You're already there with him.
Yeah, I came to Outpost Zero because I thought the art looked cool. I didn't even know who Alexandre Tefenkgi was.
Yes, I just thought same for me.
The art looked cool.
I held it, and I had to have it.
Yeah, you see the interior art, this looks great. And then, so when I saw his name on The Good Asian, I'm like, of course I'm gonna read this book. This book's, I love his art, not knowing at the time that would only been his second, U.S. Market book. And so by the time I see his name as one of the collaborators on Jason Aaron's book, no brainer for me. So at this point, if he does a cover, a variant cover, if he's on a series, I'm already there for him. Because I think his art style just it really appeals to me. I love what he does, and after such a short period of time, I'm in, and that started with Outpost Zero. His first book was the first time I saw his work, which it's rare that happens.
Yeah, just about as impressive as you can be. Kicking down the door.
Only as 5-6 years in the U.S. market. Again, I don't know what his work was over in Europe or whatnot but simply from a Western market focus and a U.S. North America focus, he's only been in the business, in the industry for about 5 or 6 years. And so to see what he's done is pretty great. In this book here, I do think he's, there is, color is really important here because of the landscape. Again, I mentioned that they're on an ice planet, they are on Hoth, but they're in this biosphere dome. So there's a lot of vibrant color there, but then there's also a lot of dark, dank, gray, grim places there.
But when they go out and you see the Hoth world, there's these swirling blues.
Yes.
It's still a beautiful palette.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Even though it communicates instant death.
Yeah. Oh no, no.
It's still visually is
100%.
appealing.
100%. And so I think the colorist here has done a really great job. What do we decide on Beaulieu?
Beaulieu.
Beaulieu, Jean-Francois Beaulieu. Sorry if we actually butchered that name as well. But he's a colorist that does a lot of work at Image and Skybound books there. Like he's done a lot of run, a big run on Invincible. I would say mainly I think I know him from he colors Scotty Young, and not just the books that Scotty Young writes and draws himself, like I Hate Fairyland, or Twig, or even the Oz books that Scotty Young did at Marvel, but even books that Scotty Young works on, but as writer, but not as artist. I'm thinking of two books that he did with artist Jorge Corona, Middle West and The Me You Love in the Dark. Those are both colored by Beaulieu. Same was, and I mean even the Rocket Raccoon book that Scotty Young did at Marvel was colored by him. So there's clearly a relationship there, working at Image Skybound and working with someone like Scotty Young. But
well, and he worked with on a book that I really loved, which was Farmhand.
Oh, sure, yeah. That is I think that's Rob Gilroy.
It is, yes.
Yeah, and
which was my hook into the book. Mm-hmm. And I ended up really loving the art and the color, even though it got a little more horror-y and gruesome than I am typically comfortable with, but still is doing it in the Rob way, which was like kind of humory.
I think he colors most of Gilroy's books as well, similar like his partnership with Scotty Young, that any book he's on, I think he tends to be a colorist on, not just Farmhand, but I think all of his books. So I think he's one of those guys that you find your creators, you find your guys, and you're always going to work with them because you're going to get something great out of them. And I think specifically working with Young is interesting because obviously Scotty Young, if you know his work, especially the stuff that he writes and draws himself, there is, he's known for the little kitty baby characters. Not that all of his characters are that, but he's known for that. And a book like I Hate Fairyland, or I mean, especially Twig, super vibrant colors. You're thinking big, very bold standout colors. So he has an eye for, again, maybe dealing with a younger audience characters. I don't know if it's fitting or whatnot, but I think his work here is really, really great because it could be very bleak on this ice planet. I think you're right, Mike, that when they go out there, it isn't just black sky, white snow, or white ice. There's
which
still
would be hauntingly beautiful in its own way. But
if that were the vibe,
jarring genre shift.
Yeah, if that were the vibe of the book, absolutely. If it were John Carpenter's The Thing, that's what you would see out there. But this isn't quite that. So yeah, you still having color and pulling those hues into what could be a desolate planet world. And then again, everything inside the Outpost, everything inside of their bubble, it looks like a regular city, with greens and growth and things like that. So it's a lot of great work to be done there. So Beaulieu does a really awesome job here. Final person on our list here is letterist, letterist. That's weird. Letterer, right?
I would have said letterer,
but
letterist sounds pretentious, like it's some boutique name for it. So
yeah. Well, also, I think when we were texting, I think I said colorer, but I think the term there
it's
actually
colorist.
Is colorist. Yeah. I got those all backwards. I'm having a weird day. It's early in the morning for me. Whatever. I don't know.
Well, when you're working with a writerist, like
a writerist, yeah, and an arter, and
a podcasterist.
Yeah. But the letterer here is Ariana Mayer. Ariana Mayer is great. She's one of the best out there currently. She works for the studio Virtual Calligraphy, which we've mentioned here before. That's like Marvel's. They do a lot of other work, but they're kind of Marvel's in-house lettering studio. So if you've read a Marvel book in the past 5-10 years, I'm sure you've seen her name there. And in all those Marvel books, it'd be be credited as VC's Ariana Maher. She does a lot of books in the X office and the Spidey office. Done some Star Wars books as well, like some of the High Republic books as well. So doing a lot of stuff out there for Marvel. She also does a little bit of DC work. I don't know how much. I know her because she currently letters Detective Comics, which what Ram V's doing, the writer there, has this kind of big operatic sense. So there's a lot of different fonts, different things to work with there. And she does a really great job. She's done a lot of Image and Dynamite books as well. I know she's done a lot of the James Bond books in the past few years, not some of the earlier run, but some of the runs on James Bond at Dynamite. She's been lettering as well too. So again, she's someone, if you pick up any sort of mainstream comic in the past like 5-6 years, I guarantee you have a book written by a book lettered by Ariana Maher. So again, she's great. Someone that just works constantly and is incredibly good at what she does. Cause your lettering really only matters when it's done poorly, whether it's a bad choice of font, bad placement of text. So when it's invisible, it's typically that's when it's done the best.
When you get too fancy with a handwriting, like in the Tommy Taylor OGN.
Yeah. But again, you understand why they try to do that. They're going for effect. But yeah, if you choose a bad font or have a bad layout, that's when letterers unfortunately really only get noticed was when they do something wrong. So I think Maher is great. Whenever I see her name on a book, again, she's on a lot of the X books that I read and a lot of the Spider-Man books, not the main Spider-Man books, a lot of the Spider family books, kind of the other Spider related books that I read. It's always great to see her name in the credits because she does a really, really great job. But yeah, that's our team. Again, not a lot of people that I think names that people are going to know. But I think names they should watch out for. Again, Mayor's a name as a letterer you're going to see. Bill Yu is probably someone that you have a book from, especially if you into indie comics and if you're in the Scotty Young hive and that hive is huge, you have books colored by him. Tefenkgi doesn't have a lot of books, but you should have all of them. He has 3 ongoing titles that he's been on. You should own and read all of them because they're that good. And McKeever as the writer is probably the one that our audience probably doesn't have the most experience with. Because, he hasn't, those Marvel books that I talked about, those were, early mid-aughts kind of things, bleeding into kind of the early 2010s. That's where he did the largest chunk of his work. He hasn't done a lot of mainstream stuff since then. I think he writes some other stuff. I think he's written for video games and other medium and things like that. So, once Outpost Zero ended, I don't know if he has any real ongoing comic work. So, but there's
interesting.
There's always a market there for that middle grade YA stuff. And who knows, maybe if Outpost Zero finds that audience, maybe I'm not saying that there's going to be they pick back up several years later with this book, but maybe a renewed interest to go back into and him writing some more of those YA books, maybe specifically for that format. Now that maybe it's a little more acceptable and a little more embraced in the readership that, it doesn't have to be a specific manga style book. It can be just a Western style book. Again, like those DC books, like the very few Marvel books that have been specific YA releases. Maybe there's a new lane opening up as both of those companies try to get a foothold. Maybe there's room for them to come back for it.
Well, so from my recollection and what I've read so far, I doubt this series in particular would ever reopen for these characters. However, the premise of this is basically endless.
100%. Yeah.
People have left Earth in these pods to colonize.
Yeah.
Just pick a different one. Just where'd that group land? And here's a bunch of characters, and you got who stayed back on Earth, which they did hint at. Some people stayed back there. Man, you want dystopia.
Yeah. What's that world like?
What's that one like? Yeah. I would read. I would read this team come together and do one of those stories. Rather than pick up these characters again.
Yeah. No,
I think that's the type of thing where they could shoehorn in, something that is commercially, objectively a little money grabby, but still do art in it. And I think that's the nature of Yeah, I mean, you're in a business. It's a comic book business.
Of course, yeah. You have to get paid. You do. So you have to get paid.
You find that sweet spot.
Yeah, but I think that is a premise. The dystopian world, the sending off a party to colonize or terraform a new place is a well-worn trope in science fiction and fantasy, maybe sci-fi more specifically. And then if you make it specifically about children, that's its own subset of that trope of oh no, all the adults are dead or gone, and it's up to this group of kids. They now have to take over and do it, there are endless possibilities there. And you would think that, again, with the explosion of that kind of market for readers who are clearly hungry for content. With you look at the sales on manga and again, those DC books, I don't know what the imprint's called now, but those do gangbusters. So that audience is there. People want to read those books, and I know maybe it if McKeever is into kind of get back into comics, that could be a way informed back in now that this book from a couple years ago is trying to tap into that market. So he has existing work out there trying to tap into that market. Maybe he gets back in with some more original work, whether it's an idea for him or for hire stuff for one of the big two.
Yeah. Yep. Anyway, if you are not yet sold on this book, I don't know what else we could do. I think we're super excited for this one. It's going to be, there are heavy emotional themes, and there is a warning about the theme of suicide, which is prominent and recurring.
Yes.
So
and significant.
Yeah. And so there's, maybe like a trigger warning, I guess, for that. So
I think you mentioned, that you said that there's a mention of that up front in the collected edition, right? In the one that you're reading. And
not
also
in this individual trades, I don't think.
That's another thing there.
And that's right.
When you mentioned that to me, again, that was kind of an moment of like, that doesn't exist in a single issue or anything like that. But because they're marketing this towards a younger audience there, I think there's even there may be even like resources, like information on resources for a hotline and things like that. Like that's all in the book there, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So it is. So if you have if you're listening, you have kids of that age, you want to give them this book there. Know that there are some themes that they touch on, and those are
be sure to be
things.
Researched and be available as a resource.
Yeah. 100%.
But I think pretending those issues don't exist is, I think, worse than dealing with them in art. And I think dealing with them in art, if it can create a conversation or have someone reach out for help. And to be clear, it's not the book is not just a prop for talking about suicide prevention and mental health. That's just an important theme that the characters go through and experience. Yes. And I think is very prominent in the coming of age genre these days.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think more so than maybe it was back in the day. I think because it's something that we deal with more in society now. That we're more it's not something that exists more. It's something we're more aware of now. I think it always existed for kids growing up and trying to find their way in the world. We just didn't acknowledge it or know what to do with it. Now there are more resources. There's more awareness of it. And so the fact that they have that in the book there, I think is great. Have had that warning there and have that information up front. So parents and kids, whoever's reading it, they know what's there and can be ready for it and have the understanding when they see it in the story and they'll see why it's there, what role it plays and how it affects both our main characters and the society as a whole there and what they're trying to build on, in this, on this desolate ice planet. So no, all these are, they're important issues. And it's I think it's why they're maybe not why, but part of the hope of trying to target this book at a younger audience to get them exposed to these things and help
and do it in a responsible way.
Yeah. Increase understanding and the responsible, reaction and discourse about it.
Yeah. So anyway, pick up this book. $15. Come on. If you go on Amazon, you get that entire series for it's like $1 an issue.
Yeah.
Like you can go raid dollar bins and have a fun Saturday doing that, or you can spend the equivalent of that for the complete collection. It's an unbelievable value. Really good book, stunningly beautiful art. Nothing else to say about it other than pick it up, read Chapter 1 if you're in the complete edition, Volume 1 if you're in single trades, or issues 1 through 4 if you are doing single issue, and we will see you next Thursday.
Peace.